I saw a video the other day from a disability advocate saying, if you ever see the words fully accessible, know that they don't know what they're talking about because nothing's ever going to be fully accessible for every single person. I like to equate where access coordinators are to intimacy coordinators, maybe like 10 years ago. You may not have access requirements right now, but at some point in your life, you will have access requirements. We all will.
Hello and welcome to We Interrupt This broadcast, here with another weekly deep dive into the Australian screen industry. I'm Loani Arman. I'm so grateful to be here today recording on beautiful Yugambeh country. My guest is Stephanie Dower. With a background as a producer and founder of Dower Productions, Stephanie is also an access coordinator where she works with film and television productions to ensure that cast and crew have genuine access to do their work. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I love the work that you do, Steph, as an access coordinator under Dower Productions. You're one of only 9 trained access coordinators in Australia. And I want our listeners to let that number sink in. One of only 9. Steph, what is access coordination and how did you end up being one of the first people in the country to be formally trained to do it?
I actually did a fellowship with a US-based organization. They were called Respectability at the time. Now they're called Disability Belongs. And I remember in one of those sessions I did with them, someone mentioned this role that they did with their own company called Production Accessibility Coordinator. And my ears pricked up. I've never heard of this. And they explained it to be someone attached to a production who oversees and facilitates the accessibility for cast and crew to ensure that everyone is able and empowered to do the role that they're there to perform. And I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, it's something that I think individually as people with disability, we've always kind of done that for ourselves. And, obviously we've had advocacy and that, but to formalize the role, I was like, this is incredible. Less than a year later, Screen Australia announced the accessibility coordinator training opportunity that they were going to facilitate. 9 of us in Australia, 3 from New Zealand, were selected to partake in this training. And really, to simplify it, an access coordinator, we are there to oversee, guide, advise around accessibility for production teams. We're there to build their confidence, to answer the questions that they have, to guide them in how they can best facilitate or support anyone with access requirements. And then on the flip side, we're also there to work one-on-one and support cast, crew, whoever is attached to the production that does have access requirements. So that in-between person that can help to facilitate accessibility on both sides. We are a below-the-line crew role, so we really fit into a production of any size. And we work with production managers, producers, line producers, anyone who's managing and guiding the production, and then any cast or crew that have disclosed that they have access requirements and are looking for an advocate in that space.
You've been in the industry for some time now. I'm curious about what the experience was like for you or for others coming onto sets or environments within the film and TV industry that weren't accessible and how you managed that. What was that like before these roles existed?
I've always spent a lot of time, a lot of energy trying to fit in to spaces and to environments that were not built with accessibility in mind. I know many other people with disability, have a similar experience where we don't want to cause a fuss. We don't want to ask for things, even though they might make our job easier or it's good for people to be aware of. The responsibility, the onus was on us as individuals. We're trying to blend in. We're trying to fit in. We're trying to do the jobs we're there to do without causing any stigma or repercussions. That historically has been a fear of many people. If you ask for support, if you disclose that you have some sort of disability, obviously mine's a visible disability, so disclosure's never been too much of an issue for me, but even for applying for jobs, I didn't necessarily want to mention that I have a disability to start with because that might mean they might not choose me for that role. I think when you mention or you disclose that you have some sort of disability or, neurodivergence, it can overwhelm the employer because they don't have the confidence or the experience to know how to support you.
Yeah, it makes sense of what you're saying about that advocacy piece for somebody to have someone on their side, but also to be helping producers or people on crew understand what accessibility needs are, what reasonable adjustments are, and making it feel like it's inclusive for all. The way that you're framing it is really a positive spin on it instead of looking at a deficit of accessibility on this set, so therefore everybody's done something wrong. It feels like there's an offering on the table in the hope of a better industry, which is really exciting.
I never begrudge anyone for not knowing what they don't know. I don't know what I don't know. We're all on a learning journey together. And if we can be there as access coordinators to support both sides of the equation, build the disability confidence and empower producers, hirers, employers to have the confidence to engage people from the disability or the DDN community and vice versa. We want to take the burden of disclosure off the individual, give them a safe space to discuss their access requirements and know that they'll be supported. To clarify, DDN, when I say that, it means deaf, disabled, and neurodivergent. I'm trying to push people towards that term because disability doesn't necessarily encapsulate everyone that we're talking about with access requirements. Not everyone who is deaf identifies as having a disability, and same with people who are neurodivergent. Not everyone identifies as having a disability. So DDN community, I'm trying to move my own practice towards.
That's really great. I'm going to take on that term too. Take us through a really practical lens. You're
Mhm.
engaged by producers to work on a production. Can you step us through a little more closely what each step of your work looks like?
I always tell people the earlier you can engage someone like an access coordinator, the better. On the Dower Productions website, we've actually broken down the different ways that we support productions during the different life cycles of film production. So, development, pre production, on set production. The heavy work is done in the planning. So, the pre production, the development. We can do script reads and look out for tone, language, give notes around best practice, make sure the way that certain people or characters are represented reflects modern values and ideas around how we perceive disability. I've been to location scouts with location managers to help identify accessibility points. I had meetings with heads of departments to ensure that if someone on their team does disclose any access requirements, to support them. And then if we've done that work correctly, by the time we get to production, we're there just to ensure everything is implemented and running smoothly. Some productions I've had minimal involvement with, some productions want a heavier handed approach. We've also done training for cast and crew to give them more contextual information and knowledge around, say, deaf culture, for example. We can build your adventure with access coordination. We can tailor a package that works for you and your production because the thing is, every single production is going to be different. The cast is going to be different. The crew is going to be different. The story is going to be different. So it really is a tailor made approach to it.
I'm curious about who is engaging you. You'd assume, right, that every production has somebody who would benefit from an access coordinator. Are you being engaged by productions where there's no express need within script? Or are you being engaged by producers who are genuinely concerned about the greater need of crew? Or is it a bit of a mix?
To date, majority of our engagements have come from producers who are working on projects that predominantly have a cast member or cast members that have access requirements. In our industry, we have this mentality of like, we are looking after cast. It's important to look after our cast on set. They're the ones on screen. They're the ones conveying our story. So obviously there's an inherent sense of make sure they're good. So that's majority of where my engagements have come from. I'm supporting a project right now that is filming over in WA. The push to engage an access coordinator actually came from the cast member themselves. So that cast member is actually from the UK, where it is a bit more commonplace over there. A couple of years ago, I worked on an Amazon production, and the push to engage an access coordinator on the ground, I came from Amazon itself. One of the cast members did have access requirements due to disability. And I think the DEI charter was like, you must engage someone like an access coordinator. I would love to see a day where the same consideration we give to cast are given to crew as well. Because the thing with having an access coordinator attached from the get go, it broadens the talent pool. If you have the confidence and the resources behind the production to engage crew, especially that do have access requirements, that's going to just give you so much more opportunity to bring new perspectives to the table and confidently engage those people.
Just staying on the Amazon production, I read on your website you ended up modifying a trailer.
Yeah, it was really an interesting situation we found ourselves in. When I was working on that production, I was talking to the unit manager, unit coordinator, and they were discussing the access requirements that the young cast member that we were supporting would need for their trailer. I'd worked on a production the year before, and I remember there was like an accessible trailer that they used because this cast member was ambulatory, so he was able to walk, but too many steps wasn't feasible for him. So I went back to my contact from the previous production, and they were like, actually, that one was found on Marketplace because none of the official suppliers at that time in Queensland offered accessible trailers. And I was like, huh, okay. I let the production team know that was the situation. And so we found a compromise. They worked with the construction crew that was attached to the production and actually built a ramp directly for this cast member. So it was great. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a creative solution that worked.
Does that trailer now exist for hire? Is that a nice piece of legacy that you can put your hand up and say you're a part of?
I wish that it was. Unfortunately not, because the ramp itself was not attached directly. Every time we had to open the door, you actually had to move the ramp away. So it wasn't a perfect solution to go to market, unfortunately. But it did just show that there is a need. The fact that two productions in Queensland within less than a year of each other were requiring an accessible trailer and that wasn't available, there's a gap in the market, obviously. So a shout out to any suppliers of film trailers. There is a gap that you can fill and corner that market.
Someone's going to be doing it. Guaranteed. They'll hear this. You can still say you were instrumental in that shift. What needs to shift, Steph? What do you think needs to shift culturally within the industry so that it's not just nice to have, but it
Yeah.
becomes something that is just a budget line every single time?
In the past, we've talked about, building awareness of people with disability and our experience and perspective. And now the awareness is shifting to us as access coordinators that we exist, that this role does exist. There is support out there. Because I think producers and storytellers, we understand why it's important to have diversity of stories and perspectives and characters. But I think the shift is now, where do we go? I don't know where to start. How do we start? And our answer to that is talk to us. Want people to know that access coordinators do exist. There are a number of us that are Screen Australia trained in the country. We're actually trained by UK based access coordinators. So we do have that international understanding of how the role works. Understand that there is support available. We are here. And that's really what we're trying to do with Dower Productions more broadly, as well as, yes, we offer access coordination as a direct service. We also have developed a couple of workshops that center around accessibility and also are developing resources, really giving not just producers, but anyone in the creative industries tools to get them started on this journey to help them embed this stuff into their everyday practice. Because I think something that people don't understand is the size of the DDN community. We're talking about at least 1 in 5 people. You're probably already working with a number of people who either have non-visible disabilities who are neurodivergent. And also, we're such a diverse community. No two people have the same access requirement necessarily. We're already a large community, but we're the only minority community that has the potential to include every single person on this earth. So you may not have access requirements right now, but at some point in your life, you will have access requirements. We all will. And so what we want to do is build the foundations of accessibility now so that if anything arises throughout your career, your production, you have the tools and the understanding to deal with anything.
Future proofing for a safer working environment is never a bad thing. There must be foundational things that you're observing within the industry that feel like such a no-brainer to you. Like, are there some things that you can share with our listeners? You could make your production more accessible by doing this, 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 and this.
The captions is a really great example. Captioning was obviously designed to support those who are from the deaf community, but I know many of people who watch film, TV, video content nowadays with captions, and they are not part of the deaf or hard of hearing community.
Yeah, hand up. I love having that option.
Another one I think about that I've started utilizing myself is easy read versions of communications. So, if you're not already familiar, an easy read version of, say, a document like a call sheet is a simplified version. It gives you the exact information you need in a visually distilled way. We're all time poor. There's a lot of information in call sheets. An easy read one ensures people are getting the information they need in the most simplified way. It's sort of like a leveling the playing field a little in terms of like how can you make your sets or your productions accessible now. It all comes down to communication. When you're onboarding someone, get into the habit of asking them, do you have any access requirements? Open that line of communication because it just fosters that more inclusive, accessible workplace environment. If you are asking those questions up front, if you have an access coordinator attached up front, it already gives the wider community a signpost to be like, okay, this producer values our well-being on set, what our access requirements are, because they're already taking those steps. Like if I see a production that has an access coordinator attached, it gives me that confidence and that safety to engage with that production or event because I know they've already got a baseline awareness of this space and they're already starting to do the work.
Are you encouraged by the number of producers who seem to have that baseline awareness, or does it still feel like an enormous mountain to climb?
There was, that initial momentum after the Screen Australia training, which happened at the end of 2023. I had a number of engagements in 2024. We need to have the push coming from multiple parts of the industry. I'm grateful for opportunities like this to talk to a wider group of people. Going forward, if producers talk to other producers, I think we value each other's experience and testimony, create that word of mouth. I remember talking to a producer a few years ago before the training actually happened, but I had known about the role over in the US. And I remember saying to this producer who was working on a production with a person with disability in the main cast. And the producer was so mindful of making sure that cast member felt safe, supported, comfortable on set. And I remember explaining if you had someone like an access coordinator attached, they could kind of facilitate that. And they were like, oh my goodness, it would just take a load off their mind. Producers are across 1,000 things on their plate already. If you can have someone that is there guaranteed to ensure people with access requirements are supported and the production teams know how to embed accessibility into their practice, creates a more inclusive culture on set. What a great thing for a producer to not have to also think about, especially a space that they're maybe not already super familiar with from their own experience. I like to equate where access coordinators are to intimacy coordinators, maybe like 10 years ago. I think at first intimacy coordinators were seen as like, oh, that would be nice to have. I don't know too many productions happening nowadays that don't know about intimacy coordinators or don't engage an intimacy coordinator. So, we're still in that early education phase, I'm calling it. But hopefully, the more we talk about it, the more we do the role, the more producers talk to other producers, we'll get to that point where it is a more commonplace, a more standard approach to bringing us onto productions.
We're in a really tough industry at the moment where budgets are tighter than ever. What does it actually cost to bring you in? And I'm wondering how that compares to the cost of not having you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard horror stories of cast or crew not getting the support they need and burning out halfway through a production, having meltdowns, producers left scrambling to try and fix things late in the game. We're a proactive approach. We want to set everything up correctly from the beginning. So we like to say that we mitigate against potential financial cost, financial risk, but we're also mitigating against things like reputational risk as well. If we are portraying experience of disability on screen, experience from the DDN community on screen, audiences are so smart nowadays. Anything that comes from an uninformed position behind the scenes is going to be picked up pretty quickly. We've seen films collapse due to inauthenticity. I remember watching something years ago. This man, he was playing the role of someone who is paraplegic. So a wheelchair user, unable to use or feel the lower part of his body, so his legs. And then there was just this one tiny little moment where I saw him leverage his weight a little bit using one of his legs to flip over, and it took me straight out of the story. Cast, crew, production teams put so much hard work, effort, finances into these productions. You don't want something as simple as, oh, like if we'd had someone on set to notice something or to bring that to our attention, something so simple could fix that reputational downfall.
If you're looking at what's on the scales, the cost is relatively small for the benefits that you're getting. So you're protecting reputation. You're also protecting livelihood and people's sense of safety and their mental well-being, physical well-being. It seems like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Don't set your budget and then think, where are we going to get access requirements from? If you factor that in from the beginning, just like you would catering or safety supervisor, it's a non negotiable. When you're going out to financiers, investors, like you know what the budget is and you know what you need to raise to go into production safely. If you want to talk through your production, your situation, ask us, is an access coordinator right for this? We're happy to have that conversation because, again, we don't begrudge anyone what they don't know. Again, this is a new space, particularly in Australia.
We'll put a link to Dower Productions in the show notes and you can see what the offerings are there. I'm thinking of the indie producers here who might not have much of a budget, but to have some conversations, or maybe there's a workshop that you can afford within the budget. I'm curious, Steph, just, in this industry, there's not much that doesn't have government funding within it. How far away are we from having agency support, something that's coming from that sort of more systemic level?
I think it is those systemic changes or adjustments that we do need for this to become more commonplace across the industry. If your script does involve any underrepresented or minority communities or perspectives, experiences, you're already required to provide a DEI plan. That's a good start. I know some agencies are turning people or producers towards being like, we think you should have someone attached to your production. I've had one production come to me after that. I don't think that's happening everywhere at this point or enough. If you are going to include anyone in your production, story wise, or whatever it may be, it should be mandated. If you want to access funding, if you want to exploit this story, there should be someone attached to your production. But we're not at that point yet. We are in the A to Z template line item for access requirements or access costs. And I know that's becoming also more commonplace in funding applications. I'm just doing one for development at the moment, and it's asked if we've included any budget for access costs. Stuff like that gets producers thinking. If it's not in front of them, they might not think about it, but asking the question acts as like a prompt.
To your point, Stephanie, if it's 1 in 5 people have accessibility requirements, there are legal risks of producers not doing this work. If we're talking hard figures, those risks are substantial.
People sometimes forget that we do have the Disability Discrimination Act. So if you are discriminating in your work practice against anyone who does have their own access requirements due to disability, which does include the DDN community, and that can be direct or indirect discriminations. Unconscious bias is something I don't think we talk enough about. If you're indirectly excluding someone, maybe you're breaking that law. Even like digital accessibility, if you have a website or if you have like online communications, making sure color contrast is, visible, font sizes, layouts, screen readers, making sure that alternative text is available for screen readers. That's not a mandate, but there are guidelines. And I know government websites, it is a mandate for them.
I imagine at the intersection of varied needs, there's no way possibly there's no way to sort of cover all, but if you're creating an environment where people feel like they can express a need and they're being asked what needs are, then you're in, to your point, that communication. And so people feel comfortable, they feel safe to assert what their needs
There's
are.
not one standard that fits all. We can work to create accessibility for the vast majority or the largest majority we can. But, there are always going to be those more specific access requirements or individualized access requirements that we do what we can to address, but nothing is ever going to be fully accessible. I saw a video the other day from a disability advocate saying, like, if you ever see the words fully accessible, know that they don't know what they're talking about because nothing's ever going to be fully accessible for every single person. It's going to be conflicting access requirements. I remember being in a meeting once where someone, due to their access requirements, they needed it to be a warmer environment. The next person was like, I overheat from my condition, so I can't operate. There's no perfect solution, but again, it's just about keeping that line of communication open and checking with people.
What have you seen as the upswing of having an access coordinator on a production? Are you noticing that it's really helping sustain careers for the DD community?
It's not just sustaining careers, but it's creating new careers or giving people new opportunities that they didn't feel were possible for them previously. It's creating that sense of confidence in them as well, knowing that they can go for a role or a production and be supported in that without having to, is this going to impact this or it's going to hurt me at some point or cause me distress? It really is building that confidence on the DDN side. It is widening the talent pool for producers and casting directors and production managers, heads of departments. If they can feel more confident engaging people from the DDN community, it's giving them more choice, more options. And overall, it's just making our stories more authentic for audiences, more informed, richer overall. It's a win win win.
We end every episode with the same question.
Mhm.
What's your big idea for the future of the Australian screen industry?
I encourage everyone, whether you're a producer, a production manager, just anyone across the industry that is in charge of managing a team, talk to someone from the DDN community. Have a conversation with us, whether it's reaching out to one of us as the access coordinators to have that, initial consultation just to get a better sense of who we are as individuals, the work we do, how we work with productions, or if there's someone within your own network, within your own community that is from the DDN community, have a chat to them about their own access requirements. If they were working on your production, how would they need to be supported? The more that we talk to each other, the more that we build that knowledge, the better it's going to be for everyone because we're just going to have more and more people from the DDN community feel safe, but also empowered to work in this industry.
Yeah, here. As the industry gets tougher, that human connection can sometimes feel like it's further away, but so much can be done by communicating well and just trying to understand each other and where people are coming from and know that we're all coming from such different places in life. We need to make our work environments more accessible and safer and more inclusive. I'm really glad that you exist, Steph. I'm really glad for the work that you do.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for supporting the work and encouraging others to engage with this space. We can only do it when everyone, comes to the table and makes it a better industry for all of us. Thank you for the support.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
The Yugambeh language people,
and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
always was, always will be.